Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is directed by James Mangold and once again sees the return of Harrison Ford as the famed archaeologist that we all know and love. Here he races against time to retrieve a legendary artifact that can change the course of history. Joining him on his adventure is his goddaughter Helena, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and he faces off against a power-hungry villain played by none other than Mads Mikkelsen. To my longtime subscribers, you guys know how much I love Indiana Jones, but to those who are new to my channel, you may not know that he just might be my favorite character of all time in film. I'm not going to put a flag in that statement, but I think he might be. I adore the original Indiana Jones trilogy and they have meant so much to my life. As a teenager, I made 2 Indiana Jones fan films that continued to stoke the flames of my love for filmmaking. Just last Halloween, I dressed up as Indiana Jones and had a phenomenal time. I have always loved these movies. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, not so much. I've reviewed all 4 in the past, and you can see my in-depth thoughts on all 4 of those movies. But even Crystal Skull has its moments. I don't consider that film an outright failure in every way. There are plenty of sequences in Crystal Skull that work just fine. I don't think a single movie directed by Steven Spielberg is poorly directed ever. So there's always something to enjoy about his films, even in Crystal Skull. So going into Dial of Destiny, I can safely say that it was in fact one of my most anticipated movies of all time. A very dangerous place for my mind to be in because it's almost always led to disappointment. Because you build up expectations that are just absolutely unrealistic. You're going to look for things that maybe the filmmakers were never planning on doing. You have hopes that maybe were never in a single draft of the script, and you just have to try to delete that from your mind, which I did very much. I went in thinking, you know what? I'm just going to assume this movie is not going to touch the original trilogy for me, because those films have impacted my life since I was a boy, a small child. There's no way I'm going to go to a screening for Dial of Destiny, see it once with some press who are sitting around with their notepads, and somehow have the same experience that those original 3 films gave me for my entire life. It's just not going to happen. So I went in thinking, I hope this is better than Crystal Skull. And that's where I try to keep my mind. And I think overall it is. The film does plenty of things better than Crystal Skull, because even though there are sequences in Skull that are really good, like all of his fights with the Russian, for instance, are a lot of fun. The early chase scene in the film is also quite good. And Harrison Ford is great in Crystal Skull, and there's a lot to like about him in the movie. But the lows of Crystal Skull were quite low. They weren't like, ooh, that wasn't the best idea. They were just very bad ideas. And Dial of Destiny does have a few, I think, very bad ideas, but nowhere near as low as the lows of Skull. And the few bad ideas that Dial of Destiny has, I think, are outshined by plenty of very good ideas and a few that are very great. I am also trying to remind myself that when I first saw Crystal Skull, I was sort of drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, this is good. No, it's good. Like, it's good, right? And then I left, and after a few months, I was like, oh, man. I don't feel like I'm doing that with Dial of Destiny, because there are aspects of this movie that I just did not like. And I will talk about some of them in a spoiler video, because they are 100% spoilers. But I also have to remind myself of one very specific thing, and that is that even a good Indiana Jones movie, which I do think that overall Dial of Destiny is a pretty good Indiana Jones movie. It's simply not a great Indiana Jones movie, and because of that, disappointment is almost unavoidable. But we also live in a world now where film criticism has kind of blended with film journalism and entertainment hosts, and the whole idea of actually talking about a film with any nuance has almost universally lost its meaning, which is very sad. I can still go back and read Roger Ebert's reviews, and I feel like I am really getting to the root of the film when I listen to the way he spoke about films. And I just don't really feel that anymore. I feel like we have become so binary. It's either good or it's bad, it's great or it's awful, and there's no room for nuance anymore, which I just think is awful. While I did have some nitpicks and one specific choice near the end of the film that I just didn't think was a very good choice, overall, I really enjoyed watching Dial of Destiny. I think the prologue is incredible. The entire first 20 minutes of the movie is so well directed, so well staged, and extremely exciting. However, everyone will talk about the de-aging. And that's because of what is my biggest issue with de-aging in film. And that is that it's impossible to miss. The best kind of CG in movies is the kind you don't notice. It's a street that's too short, and so they need to extend it and make it look longer. It's cars filling a road. It's a city skyline being extended to make it look bigger, adding more buildings. It's things that make the shot look fuller that we never look for. More than likely, there will only be one set of audience members who watch Dial of Destiny who don't realize that Harrison Ford has been de-aged in the prologue, and that is small children. Most people are going to know. And so that's what you're going to be focusing on. You're going to be like looking at that face the whole time, which means you're not paying attention to how good the writing is, to how great the directing is, to the phenomenal action sequences and John Williams' amazing score. Because you're trapped looking at this face the whole time, trying to see if it works for you. In which case, it doesn't always. You can tell, and there are moments where he's moving around where it kind of shifts in an unnatural way. Is there a better way to tell this scene? As written, I don't think there is. And so you just kind of have to move past the fact that this CG is noticeable. And in my case, it was. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of people who are fine with it. Now that I've talked absurdly long about de-aging, I can say that that prologue was really good. I thought it was incredible and extremely fast-paced and a ton of fun. It felt like classic Indiana Jones to me. Once we get into the 1960s, I was mesmerized by the production design. The recreation of the era was beautiful. I truly do think that James Mangold is one of the most underrated directors alive, which is strange considering how many films he's made. But if I were to ask my mom who Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino was, she would know. If I were to say who's James Mangold, she would have no idea. But if I started listing his movies, she would realize she's probably seen most of them. I always use my mom as like a gauge for this type of thing. Like, would my mom know who this person is? Because my mom is like the best example for the general audience member who goes to movies to just be entertained. My mom doesn't care what critics say. She has no idea what IMDb is. She doesn't know what Rotten Tomatoes is. She just goes to the movies and pays for a ticket to watch the film and hopes that she'll have a good time. James Mangold is truly one of the most versatile filmmakers ever. Heavy is nothing like Copland, which is nothing like Girl Interrupted, which is nothing like Kate and Leopold, which is nothing like Identity, Walk the Line, 3:10 to Yuma, Night and Day, The Wolverine, Logan, Ford v Ferrari, and now Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It makes perfect sense that a filmmaker who's done indie dramas, crime sagas, musical biopics, racing sports biographies, and comic book films, and a horror movie would be able to tackle something like direct an Indiana Jones movie. And I think he knocked it out of the park. This movie is beautiful to look at. It is so filmic. There's a grit to it. You can see the vignette on the left and right sides. It's just beautiful looking. The anamorphic lenses and the distortion that happens. I could go on and on. This movie looks like an Indiana Jones film. And even though the CGI face is a bit much, in general, I thought the visual effects were far more realistic than the ones that were in Crystal Skull. Much discussion and debate has surrounded the character Helena Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, most of said discourse happening on this very platform I'm talking to you on, and mostly from people who haven't seen the movie yet. She's very good in the film, and I like the idea of father figure in Indiana Jones, but not really, because they don't get along great. They haven't seen each other for a very long time, but obviously as a godfather, her safety as a young person anyway has been entrusted to him. And so there's a unique relationship that blossoms from this, in that he wasn't always there, even though he was entrusted with that title by her father. But she's also been studying archaeology her whole life and has a passion for it, and makes for a very interesting pair-up with him on this adventure. Mangold also helms some really terrific chase sequences, namely one through Tangier that I think is the film's peak action scene. And can we just sit back for a second and acknowledge how incredible it is that there's a new Indiana Jones movie scored by John Williams? I've been listening to these scores my whole life, This guy has been scoring classic film after classic film since I wasn't even a speck of dust. And yes, of course, the score works wonderfully. I cannot wait to buy it. Surprise, surprise, John Williams is really good at his job. Harrison Ford is also terrific in the movie, and one of my favorite things about it is that the film does not shy away from the fact that he is old. In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Shia LaBeouf jokes, "What are you, like 80?" Yes, he is. But the film depicts our hero as having aged. When he's trying to scale a cliffside, he's like, why am I doing this? And his whole body hurts and he's got aches and pains. He's been shot multiple times. As he says in the trailer, he's experienced torture from voodoo. I like that the film acknowledges the existence of Temple of Doom, by the way. It made me very happy. The film doesn't try to throw him around like he's a rag doll. He's not jumping across ceiling beams like he was in Crystal Skull. And this movie knows our hero has aged. And I think that's a very valuable thing for an action film to do. To show that, yes, we do in fact age, but also embrace that and say that's fine. You can still exist as a human. You don't have to go sit in a recliner. You can still go on an adventure. You are still valuable as a person. Mads Mikkelsen is one of my favorite actors ever, and I think he is wonderful in this movie. I think he's a much better villain than another fantastic actor in Cate Blanchett. Spalko from the fourth movie. I think he's a much better villain. He's very interesting, and I love his motivation once it's revealed. I do think that the revelation of his motivation came a bit too late in the film, but I really do love him in the movie. I think he's extremely strong. I also loved Boyd Holbrook as a trigger-happy assistant of sorts to Mikkelsen's villain. As mentioned, there are some things about the film that didn't work for me. They are massive spoilers, and so I won't get into them here. But essentially for me, it just came down to one choice for a character that the writers have made that I think made for a less interesting third act. And that's all I'll say. I'll get more into it in a spoiler video. But overall, Dial of Destiny, I think, is a pretty good movie. It has some issues, but it's paced beautifully. It's shot incredibly. It's acted wonderfully. The score is amazing. It has a better villain than 4 did, and probably a better villain than Temple of Doom, even though I love Temple of Doom. But there is just no way this movie was ever going to be better than that original trilogy for me. I do think overall it makes way better choices than Crystal Skull did, and I think as a film it is better. But I do think that there will be one specific aspect of it that people will not like, just like there is one specific aspect of Crystal Skull that universally people don't seem to like. And it's interesting to see a similar choice at almost the exact same point of the movie, really, that I could see a lot of people checking out from. But I will also say that the final scene in the movie brought a tear to my eye. I think they did a very good job with it. And you can owe a lot of that to John Williams, but at the end of the day, Harrison Ford has given this role his all. He has stepped into it so many times now because he loves this character, and he loves the audience that loves these movies. And you can feel that every time he's on screen. And James Mangold remains a phenomenal filmmaker. It really just comes down to one choice made in the third act that just did not work for me. As you're watching the movie, it's working well enough, and the action seems to be propelling along fairly well. And you're thinking to yourself, all right, so we're building to like a thing, right? And when you don't quite build to that, you realize you peaked a little earlier in the movie. That's a bit disappointing. But at the end of the day, I do think that the film has more positives than it does negatives. Don't go into this movie expecting a classic. I would temper your expectations. Find some enjoyment in seeing Harrison Ford don this hat and wield that whip again. Find some enjoyment in hearing John Williams' iconic music with some great new themes. And there's good stuff here. It's just not perfect. That does not mean that the film is awful. I feel similarly to how I did when I saw Jason Bourne. Jason Bourne is not a bad movie. It's just not the Bourne Ultimatum. And that's about the world we're living in here with Dial of Destiny, I think. Also, I just want to give a big thank you to those who have continued to help and support my film Shelby Oaks in post-production. We've received a lot of help, and I am just so grateful. Thank you so much. For those who don't know, I have a handful of visual effects shots in Shelby Oaks that have yet to be completed. They were priced out at numbers exceedingly higher than we anticipated. And I really want to pay my collaborators well. We have people working on this film in Germany. We have people working on this film in Vietnam and New Jersey. Visual effects artists that are phenomenal at their jobs, but I want to pay them well, and I want to make sure that we can get these shots right. We got to finish this movie, and we got to finish it on time. I got festival submissions coming up, and I just really want to make sure I can deliver the best film that we have the ability to deliver. And I think we're really close to that. And I have you guys to thank for that, but we're still not quite there. So if you can visit shelbyoaksmovie.com, there you can purchase a Blu-ray, posters, all kinds of fun items and great perks that are going to support our film in post-production and that will allow me to make the best film I can for you guys. Honestly, any little bit helps, truly. Anything does. And I am just so thankful that you guys have continued to support this film. As I mentioned in my video that I made about this, I always feel awkward and weird about asking, but at the end of the day, film is more important to me than my brief, uncomfortable feelings I have asking this, and I just want to do my best to make the best film I can. We've tried very hard to do that with the limitations that of course come with making an indie film, but I do think that with the time we had and with the help that we've received from you guys, I am very proud of our movie, and I want to make the best one I can, and we're so close to being able to finish these visual effects in a very good way that honestly is going to look better than most films of our budget. So I'm so grateful to you guys for continuing to help. And if you can, any little bit does help. Please visit shelbyoaksmovie.com and continue to support our film in post-production. Thank you so much.